Numbers 12, 1 through 16. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, "Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also?" And the Lord heard it. And the man Moses was very meek. And the man Moses was very meek, more than all people who were on the face of the earth. And suddenly the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron and Miriam, "Come out here. Come out, you three, to the tent of meeting." And the three of them came out, and the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward. And he said, "Hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, and not in riddles, and he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. When the cloud removed from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous like snow. And Aaron turned toward Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said to Moses, "O my Lord, do not punish us because we have done foolishly and have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes out of his mother's womb." And Moses cried to the Lord, "O God, please heal her, please." But the Lord said to Moses, "If her father had but spit in her face, should she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut outside the camp 7 days, and after that she may be brought in again." So Miriam was shut outside the camp 7 days, and the people did not set out on the march till Miriam was brought in again. After the people set out from Hazeroth and camped in the wilderness of Paran.
Okay, so my church, we're going through the book of Numbers, right? And initially, it didn't sound very exciting because a better editor would have helped. Like, you're not going to sell a book that begins with, the title Numbers. But it's actually been really good for our church. And today what I want to talk to you about is really simple. This is the main thing I want to think about with you today. It's envy breaks community. Just envy, or the biblical term is more covetousness, right? But envy breaks community. And let me just take a step back. I want to just offer this first overall comment. One of the striking things about the Bible, but the Old Testament in particular, is this: there are no good guys, right? There are no good guys in the Bible. So if you think about Israel's story, the way it begins is initially it appears binary, right? You have evil Pharaoh, evil slave taskmasters, and then you have poor Israel enslaved, right? So initially we get a kind of black and white view. And then as the story unfolds, you realize that Israel, there's something deeply wrong with them, right? In the previous chapter, there's a section where it's really hard in the wilderness, and they start talking about the good old days in Egypt. And one of the things that they highlight is, do you remember the onions, right? And I was like, what is wrong with you? And I was thinking, the onions must have been amazing, right? And and so you begin to see that the worldview in the Bible is not so black and white. It's not so binary. Because Israel looks just as bad, if not worse than Egypt eventually, the Egyptians. And then it gets even worse. You would think, okay, the average Israelite is not great, but the leaders are great. But in this passage, we see that the leaders are just as bad, right? And the point that the Old Testament makes, which is very relevant to us, is this: that there are no heroes in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. There are no good guys. The way Paul describes in Romans is that all have fallen short of the glory of God. And the reason why I want to highlight that to you is everyone here knows this. We've become a very polarized age, good, bad, you're of this political party or that. The Bible actually is one of the ways that we can really become one reconciled people. At my church is like a house of dynamite. What I mean by that is we are split right in the middle between liberals and conservatives. Our church is so weird. Like every Sunday could be our last Sunday, right? And no, I'm shocked we've made it. And all the liberals are convinced that I'm like a staunch like conservative, and all the conservatives believe I'm like a flaming liberal. And so there's always like this really interesting like bet going on, like Sunday I will come out, right? And I was like, man, so like, but you see the thing is, do you see how the Bible invites us not to be so like good versus bad, but that we actually all need Jesus, right? And so I think you just wanted to make that comment. But here we go. Envy breaks community. Let's look at this fantastic passage. Just 3 things to consider. Number 1, envy. Number 2, God's assessment. That's really an interesting section. And then finally, how to heal from it. Okay, envy. What is it? What does God think? And how can we heal from it? So let's first look at the sin of envy. Now, what's very striking about this passage is this. Miriam was a force to be reckoned with. She was like one of the first prophetesses, if not the first prophetess, which means she had a position. And Aaron was the high priest. So when they come and they basically say, like, hey, Moses isn't special. Does God speak only through him? We have to understand that there's something here that's especially noteworthy. We're not comparing CFO, CEO, CTO. Or, I'm sorry, we're not comparing the CEO with like summer interns. You see, all 3 people had positions of authority, right? But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for Miriam and Aaron. And by the way, probably the pecking order, Miriam was probably the oldest, Aaron was second, and Moses was third. Some scholars think that factored into this, right? But you see, friends, this is the thing about coveting, right? Or envy. It's never enough. This is what envy sounds like. This is what it sounds like. Yeah, but. That's really what the essence of envy is. Like the way C.S. Lewis put it is this. You're blind to everything you have, right? And you are acutely sensitive to everything everyone else has, right? And again, it feels this way. Do you find that you may not say this aloud, right? But you're always looking at other people, and therefore you cannot see your own situation, and you're feeling, yeah, I'm a prophetess, I'm high priest, but Moses, little brother, God's, like everyone esteems him, right? That's the essence of envy, right? And 2 quick reflections. Here I want to reflect with you. The first is this. Most of us, the older we get, we know enough not to make it so obvious that we're envious, right? A mentor of mine over 25 years ago said this to me. I was transitioning from doing youth ministry to, like, you might say, adult ministry. And he said this. It was really insightful. He said, you have to adjust to not adjusting. Because adults are not very different from children. They're just better at hiding things, right? So when I was preaching to youth group, this is the best place to train. When you were not making contact with the ball, they made it very obvious. They were like, boring. But as adults, right, we get really good at this. Have you noticed you've mastered the art, right? Like, You're not listening. You're thinking about like Costco or, but you're like, Jesus, just not on cue, right? So, as we get older, we have enough wherewithal to not be like, man, I envy her husband, or I envy his job. You see, we don't say it aloud. Instead, what we do is exactly what Aaron and Miriam do here. You notice the way this text begins? They're like, oh my goodness, look at the woman Moses married, right? He went beyond the bounds of Israel. So they gave a cover for what's really going on underneath. Now, I'm not saying that we should never offer any legitimate criticism, but I would be very careful when you are criticizing others to consider maybe there's envy underneath. Let me give you an example. So one of the benefits of being in one area for a long time, and again, it is so encouraging to see a lot of old faces, right? I'm sort of lying there because my vision is so bad that honestly, like my outlook on life is Monet paintings. Like even now, I can't tell if you're listening because your faces are blurred. I'm not exaggerating this, but I sense there are a lot of old faces, right? But one of the advantages of being at a church for a long time is this. So some of my members, I've known them for 25 years now. I don't know where time has gone by. And this is really interesting. So I talked to this one dad. I knew him when he had just gotten married. And so it was like he was in his mid-20s. And he was criticizing some of the older couples in the church. He goes, look at these older couples. Look at them skipping Sundays because like they take their kids to activities. They're not honoring the Sabbath, right? Now it's interesting, as the years have gone by, he did exactly the same thing. So I asked him, what was that about? And he said, I think at that time I was just envious they were able to do things I couldn't. You see, and so I'm not suggesting that every time you offer criticism there's envy. But we are very good at appearing spiritual when in reality there's something sinful underneath. That's what's going here. So that's one thing about envy. The second thing is this, and I hope that you'll consider this. This is like so important for understanding our context, right? The second thing is this. It's really, we're not that far in the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Do you notice how on the one hand, envy comes up a lot, and it's deadly. Like Cain envied Abel, kills him. Joseph's brothers envy him. They essentially kill him. And now we have Miriam and Aaron envying Moses. So this is a real issue, and the Bible forbids it, envy. It says it's really bad. But this is what I want to suggest to you, and I want to ask you to consider this. What the Bible forbids, our culture has normalized. Okay, let me unpack this very quickly. And the reason for this is the way you and I, doesn't this make sense? Approach identity is what some sociologists have called. You and I, we don't think about identity in terms of that which is received, but rather that which is based on our resumes. So we have resume identities, right? So for me, it's not so much I'm the son of first-generation immigrants from like South Korea, but it's what letters do I have after my name, right? What have I accomplished? We have these metrics, right? And so what happens is because our identity depends on individual accomplishment, our identity is inherently comparative, okay? So let's say I moved to Northern Virginia when I was 25, right? And this is what I noticed immediately about moving to this area. So there's the professional metrics, and then there are, you might say, the personal metrics, right? So as a professional, I had to get my PhD. I had to publish my dissertation at a reputable publisher. I had to speak at certain conferences. And then, and only then have I arrived. The other thing I noticed about when I first came to Northern Virginia was even though no one said this explicitly, it was understood. I began by maybe renting a room. I eventually moved to a condo, and then to a townhouse, and to a single-family house, and then a Northern Virginia single-family house. You know what I mean, right? And you see, what one sociologist says is this. Therefore, what happens is because of this identity formation model, we're always thinking comparatively and inevitably enviously. Because we're looking at what everyone else has, and we're thinking, yeah, but. You see, and so our society has normalized comparison and ultimately envy because of the identity formation model we have. You see, and so for us, we've become desensitized to this, right? I was looking at one study, right? And I'm not, this is true universally, but this one particular group spends so much time on social media. It's actually young mothers. And I looked at the hours, according to this one study. I thought it was going to be like 30 minutes, an hour, because, you know, like, new mothers have to sleep, right? But do you know what the average is right now for young mothers on social media? It's about 4.5 hours every day. No, you were about to say weekly? No, every day. I was like, how do you even do that, right? But you see, the point that's being made here is that, you see, for us as a society and as a culture, what the Bible forbids, the Bible has normalized, right? So we're taught to compare. And in that process, we inevitably envy. And I just want you to just be aware of that. I'm not saying social media is inherently evil, but what I'm saying is, again, there's something what the Bible forbids, our culture normalizes. Okay? So just think about that. So that's number one. Number two, right? What does God think? I love this scene. The three siblings are sort of bickering, except Moses, because he's the most humble man who ever lived. He also authored Numbers, so questionable, okay? But here we go. Isn't this the worst? They're bickering, and all of a sudden God shows up. And he says, family meeting, right? This reminded me of growing up. Mostly my mom disciplined us. But occasionally, my dad would be like, okay, I need to meet with the three of you. And the three of us, my siblings and I, we were always like, no, it's Dad. Right? So anyway, God shows up on the scene, and it's fascinating. He essentially says this. He essentially says, do you have are you serious? You are going to speak against the one that I have basically set as the leader of this community. You can tell God, right, is upset. And he says some pretty strong things. He says, your dad should have spit on your face, right? And Miriam gets leprosy. And this is the thing. This is what I want to get at with you. You see, every culture and every Christian subgroup, right, has defined what is really truly sinful behavior. Okay, so if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, the whole "I kissed dating goodbye" era. The only cardinal sin within evangelical Christianity was what? Sexual sin, right? This is when we call it the purity movement. And just for the record, sexual sin is serious. But actually, when you look at the Bible, it's actually one sin among many. One of the reasons why it's so important to work through the entire Bible is because it keeps you from being one-dimensional. You begin to see that there are a lot of other sins that we just don't take seriously, right, because of our culture. I was talking to one PCA pastor. I'm in the PCA. And, I was asking him this question. I said, in our particular presbytery, why do we discipline for this sin and not? And he goes, okay, I'll give you insider information. He said, in our presbytery, the two things you cannot do as a pastor is get drunk at a church setting. And in my mind was like, oh, so anywhere else it's okay? I wasn't sure how to process that, right? I'm sorry, was that inappropriate? Sorry, Steve, right? No, I was just wondering what he meant by that. And then sexual sin. And he goes, everything else is sort of and I don't know how accurate his statement was, but what I'm saying is that every context, we have certain big no-nos, but everything else becomes acceptable sins. Here, this is what God says. He says, I really care about community. I really, really care about community. So envy is breaking community. And then if God cares about community, he says this, right? And this, by the way, is a cardinal sin in Western society today. God says, I really care about order and specifically this dirty word, authority. Authority. And God says, the fact that you disregarded authority, Miriam in particular, you're going to become a leper. You see, and don't you feel this? Let's say Miriam had committed some egregious sin. Let's say she had slept with one of the priests. We would be like, oh my gosh, she of course deserves to be cast out. Do you notice we're it's like when Eve ate the forbidden fruit, they're cast out of the Garden of Eden. You're like, I would have had no hope. You're like, I've done much worse things. But you see, what I'm inviting you to consider is this. Why do we respond in that way? Why do we look at this particular incident and we almost feel like, whoa, God seems a little extreme? It's because you and I, we tend not to think about community breaking as that bad. And not only that, in our culture, going against authority is actually a virtue. You see? And so the Bible is challenging us to think about this. Friends, think about this, right? For some of you, again, let's use the easy one. You would say, okay, sex outside of marriage, ooh, bad, right? And it is. But for us, really having a high view of authority, submitting to authority, doing everything possible to maintain community. We're like, But that's why the Bible is good for us. It begins to fill us out, right, where we are lacking. So again, I just want to ask you to consider this. God, for all the sins he could have confronted, he says to Miriam and Aaron, you're breaking community. You have a very, very low view of authority. 2 quick reflections, okay? One is this. I would actually argue, all of us deep down, we love order and authority. Let me give you an example, right? Deep down, we all love it. Do this thought experiment with me for a moment. Let's say you have a group of high schoolers, right? And they have a PE teacher who doesn't really care. Just imagine, thought experiment, right? So he says, this entire semester, right, September, October, November, December, right, we're just going to have open gym, free play. Initially, the kids are going to be like, this is awesome, until like 2 weeks later, like, this is so boring, right? Whereas, have you noticed what we are naturally drawn to, right? The Knicks recently won the NBA championship, which, I'm from New York. Oh, that is amazing. And I saw Game 7 from a distance, obviously on TV. You could feel the energy. Everyone was there. Everyone was paying attention. And you know this, right? Why? Because the fact that, think about how lame the NBA final would have been. No referees. Everyone makes up their own rules. You do you. We're like, oh, this is so boring. What made it so appealing to us, right, was being part of something that was ordered, organized, right, and had clear rules and regulators of these rules. You see, we are not as authoritative as you might think. We know this from actually doing life. So that's number one. Now, this is not being inappropriate. This is actually being very thoughtful as believers. I want to suggest to you the main way we, all of us today in Western society, we avoid authority. There's this really great article by David Brooks in The Atlantic, and it's called this. Very controversial, but listen to it. The nuclear family was a mistake. It's a very sophisticated, thoughtful article, right? And there are a lot of nuances to it, but think about that title for a moment. This is why, again, the conservatives at my church think I'm a flaming liberal. They're like, he's attacking the family again, right? But listen to this title. The nuclear family was a mistake. This is basically Brooks's argument. He says, actually, if you look at the nuclear family, let's define it. Husband, wife, like 2 kids, 2.5, and then you always need like a dog. That's some mix of a doodle nowadays. Have you noticed? Everyone has a doodle of some like form. Anyway, so that's nuclear family. From an anthropological, sociological perspective, do you ever consider how rare the nuclear family is? Think about it. Those of you who are from different cultures or just growing up, like the nuclear family is actually this phenomenon that is so ingrained in our society, but it's actually very foreign from a historical anthropological perspective. For a long time at my house, we had 2 seminary students live with us. They lived with us for 7 years. And this illustrates how we can only think in terms of nuclear families. So my daughter at that time was like 5. And, in kindergarten, you have to draw a picture of your family. So I met with her teacher, and she goes, here's the picture your daughter drew. There are her 2 brothers, your Labradoodle, the mom, and then 3 men. And she looked at me, she's like, what's going on here? I said, oh, those are her 2 uncles. And she goes, yeah, how come? But they're like white. And I was like, well, I think that's how God made them. And she didn't have a concept for understanding we have 2 uncles that live with us, and this is our family. Right? So that's what David Brooks is saying. But this is where it gets really interesting. You know why we love the nuclear family? Think about this. The nuclear family is this unique vehicle. It allows us to maintain autonomy and some semblance of community. Think about how, you see, so let's say you have a nuclear family, right? You can still pursue your hopes and dreams. I have a job offer in Florida, right? I can just get up and go, where the cost of living is like maybe half, the pay is double, and I love what I do. So that's my autonomy. That's my individuality. But I don't want to do it entirely alone. No problem. I have my spouse, I have my kids, and I have my Labradoodle. Boom. You see, and so what has happened in our society today is that the nuclear family has become this interesting vehicle to allow us to maintain what we love the most, our autonomy, but maintain some semblance of community. One of the things that David Brooks says that's really very insightful is this. He says, right, only rich people believe in the nuclear family. Because he says only rich people can afford it. And what he meant is this. You see, as you do life, right, let's say you're not rich. What happens is let's say all of a sudden, you have to go and take a hospital shift. You can ask, your aunt, your uncle that's local and ask for their help. But if you're rich, you can what? Just hire help. You see, if you're not rich and your son is out of control, you just throw him to one of the uncles and uncles puts him in place. If you're rich, you send them to a therapist. And Brooks says, therefore, see, nuclear family is a privilege that only, right, the rich can enjoy. But the longer you live life, and I think many of you have begun to realize this, you realize that the nuclear family was never meant to hold the weight that it currently holds, right? And that's why in his article, he says, what we need is a broader tribe. We need a community. We need what the Bible says. We need to be part of the people of God. But if we're going to be part of the people of God, what we need is a high view of community and therefore a high view of authority. And I just want to highlight this. This, again, is the cardinal sin in our Western society today. No one is going to tell me how to live. And I want to say, Charles Taylor, he has this really great phrase. He says, you see, all of us, we're all secular now. This is how even the most conservative Christians think, right? As long as I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, then I'm happy. The Bible says, basic part of being a Christian is placing yourself under authority, okay? And at that point, the liberals at my church are like, I knew it. Look at that conservative, right? And that's why no one's happy at my church. And yet, they come for more. Okay, but what's the solution? I love this. And we'll end with this. I got to go quick, but let me end with this. There's this beautiful scene. And I wish I could just unpack a lot of this more with you, but just let's end in this way. There's this really great scene. Miriam becomes a leper. Aaron's like, my bad, oh no, right? And here's the most beautiful scene. Moses, up to this point, has been quiet. Now, this is why my heart is so sinful. Had I been Moses, I'd be like, ha-ha, right? That's me. That's why I need Jesus. But anyway, Moses does the most beautiful thing. Imagine you're Moses. Your siblings, the ones, they're supposed to have your back. They point their finger at you. They're like, hey, what's wrong with you? You're not special. You're the youngest. You married a foreigner, right? You don't deserve to be a leader. And then God punishes them, right? And then what Moses does all of a sudden is amazing. It's so beautiful. He intercedes for Aaron and Miriam and says, God, have mercy on them. Don't give them what they deserve. And because of his intercession, Miriam is cast out for 7 days, but eventually she's brought back in. And, Aaron gets to keep his position as high priest. See, friends, this is why this is so beautiful. Moses, they get what they don't deserve because they have an intercessor who prays for mercy. Imagine a society where we think not in terms of they get what they deserve, but instead we become a society where people get what they don't deserve. And this is why Moses is a great foreshadow of a greater Israelite, a greater intercessor. Let's fast forward in redemptive history. Remember on the cross, right? All of Jesus' opponents they were mocking him. He saved others, he could not save himself. If you truly are the Son of God, then come down, right? The Roman soldiers are laughing at him. The Jewish religious leaders are laughing at him. There's no one righteous, right? And what does Jesus do? It's so amazing. He pleads with the Father and he says, forgive them. They know not what they are doing. And you see, and the reason why the gospel is so beautiful, this is what Jesus essentially says. He says, Father, don't spit on their face. Instead, spit on my face so that they can be treated as honored children, sons and daughters of God. Jesus basically says to God, he says, don't make them a leper. Because as you know from the Bible, if you were a leper, you were cast out of society. Instead, Jesus says, make me a leper and clothe them, with righteousness. And finally, right, Jesus says, cut me off from the land of the living so that they can be brought in. You see, friends, this is why the gospel is really the perfect embodiment, right, where we get what we don't deserve and so much more than we could ever ask or imagine. You see, friends, and the reason why the gospel alone frees us, right, from envy is this. You see, it's not that all of a sudden you become aloof to life, right? Recently, here's a great example. Like Elon Musk, right? When SpaceX first went public, the IPO was incredibly successful, at least initially, and he became like the first trillionaire in human history, right? Now, I'm not going to lie. I was like, trillionaire? I just want 1% of that. But you see, for you and me, we can look at someone like Elon Musk, and we are able to say this. This is not like Karl Marx, religion of the masses, opium of the masses. We're just out of touch with reality. We're able to say, that's great. But for you and me, as sons and daughters of God, because of Jesus, someday we are co-heirs of glory, and the best is yet to come. And so we're able to look at others, and this is what happens. We look at others like Elon Musk, we're like, he's a trillionaire. Yeah, but someday I'm going to reign in eternity with Jesus because of mercy. You see, the yeah, but gets reversed. And all of a sudden you're able to look at people, you're able to be like, yeah, it's fine. Because for me, as someone that has put my trust in Jesus, already I have so much more than I could ever ask or imagine. Don't you love that passage that says this? Think about this. This is your future if you have trusted in Jesus. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has in store for those who trust in Him. You see? And this is why, friends, right? The gospel solution is like, don't envy, it's bad. The gospel says, don't envy because you're in a position where everyone else ought to envy you. Closing application. I want to close just with this image. What does this mean for us? What does this mean for us? What can life actually look like for us? So one of the articles I was looking at, there was this image, and it was so sad. There's this image of, again, a young mother. She was holding like a baby in her right arm, and it was really cute. The baby was staring straight at his mother's eyes, right? So imagine this. But the way this article conveyed this image so well was this. As the baby was staring at mom's left hand was holding a smartphone, and her eyes were fixated on like the smartphone, right? What the gospel says is this. You see, if you really believe that God has given us more than we could ever ask or imagine, instead, look at the baby in front of you versus looking at everything you don't have. In other words, this is what, like when we heal from envy, this is what happens. Your mind, instead of constantly wondering what everything everyone else has, is you think about what sphere has God placed you in right now. And you are thankful and you are faithful to that sphere. For me, it's really simple. My wife, my 3 kids, we still have to take care of mom and dad, which is part of our calling. And then, my church. And then, seminary. But really just those 2 domains, my church and like my, family. It's okay that I never get invited to speak at Gospel Coalition. It's okay that like I don't write a bestseller. right? It's okay that, I have a colleague at RTS, his name is Grace Sutanto. He's like a rock star, right? And whenever I go anywhere, they're like, do you know Gray? I was like, he lives a block from me. And they're like, oh my gosh. I'm like, it's overrated. Right? But you see, for me, that's what the gospel does, right? It actually frees you from the chains of envy. It enables you to look at the child, right? The responsibilities right in front of you. I want to encourage you. We live in a culture that has normalized envy, and it is robbing you of your joy, right? If you believe that because of Jesus, you already have far more than you could ever ask or imagine. You are in a position where for the rest of eternity, right, figuratively, everyone else will envy you. Then you can finally be free and focus on the things that God has put before you. I wish for you that freedom. Okay? Let's pray.